Pig farmers are very opinionated people.
Okay.
I mean, I've been called abrasive. So sell to your friends and family and soak them for. Every farm's going to have a little bit different business model. I mean, I don't know if I can call it a business model when you're raising 3 or 4 pigs, but obvious scenarios that each of us are going to have to deal with in raising pork to make sure that you're even, or not have your brother constantly, stealing pork. Raiding the freezer. We actually stumbled across a University of Wisconsin Madison, was it? Madison?
I think so.
Flyer from 1942, from 1942, and it's like,
it was like 50 pages.
It's like, wow, this is really good stuff, relevant stuff.
Yes.
So hog farming for the backyard farm, it hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Pigs are pigs. You can feed them just about anything and they'll survive. You've got to get it done what you want. Adam, now I got to clean that up. Before Adam sees. Who did that? Who was it now?
Who's the big guy?
How many, if you want to have pigs just to butcher in the fall, how many would you recommend start?
They need a buddy.
Okay.
I mean, you need 2 because they need to have a friend.
So we watched a guy, Justin Rhodes, he's up in North Carolina, he raised pigs, but he was trying to show that you could do this on, in a smaller lot, but basically what he did is put together a carport. He had 2 pigs, but he did a deep bedding system where you just keep every day adding bedding. What do you think of that? Is that, or is that not something you recommend?
So, I don't like to put any more effort into things than I have to. And yeah, I'm a lazy person. But I still get up every morning. Lazy's relative. I like to make things as easy as possible. Therefore, having a range for them to run gets them their manure. There's the deep bedding method, which is going to involve you at some point taking that and spreading it, and then you have to make another thing. So it's not like you're avoiding, distributing the manure. It's just that you're putting it off until the animals are butchered, and then it's like, well, you start the process over again. Delicious.
He's licking it up.
Delicious.
Animals do a lot of things like that.
That's typical.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
If you have chickens and guineas, how are the heritage breeds with free range?
If you raise your animals together, they should get along pretty good. The commercial, we had some commercial cross that when the mommy duck would take her babies in the pen, the pig would run after and eat her baby. So
Yeah.
So
Think of gross things a dog would do. Take them too.
pigs and dogs are actually very, very similar. It takes a little bit. We were $7,500 into the project before we had our first sale. Because it takes a year before your has her piglets, okay, and now we would be selling those piglets at 8 weeks. So you're 14 months in if you start with baby piglets, if you're going to sell other breeding stock. If you're going to raise those piglets up to be 7 or 8 months in after the first 12, now you're 20 months away from selling if you start with breeding stock. If you guys aren't going to be breeding pigs, you're going to be buying.
Yes.
To
start with.
So, if you're buying them at 8 weeks and you're going to butcher them at months, you're 5 months away from a paycheck. So you need to figure that out. Making money, you have to track your expenses. And if you have 3 pigs or 4 pigs, you're going to keep one for yourself and you're going to sell 3. You need to figure out what you all have into it and then market it as, pasture raised, whatever you're feeding it, and just ask a price that is appropriate so that you don't lose money the first time around and you get if you're trying to start a breeding operation, it's a little bit different because you you're buying thousands of dollars of fencing and thousands of dollars of housing. There's a pretty big startup cost involved in any sort of farm because we didn't actually have any infrastructure. Kind of start from scratch.
You just said though, you like 4, keep 1, like that's kind of what I was after.
Yes.
Did you say 4 is the good number? Keep
Well, if
1
you're trying to
just
get free
Just
pork,
to cover your own costs basically and have your pork sort of paid for.
right?
That's
and,
a
well,
reasonable,
you're
maybe?
for your time.
Yes,
The
right,
other 3
obviously.
cover your
Yeah,
expenses.
not counting the time.
So, my first job, I was making $3 an hour washing dishes. That's kind of what I get paid farming. So, I mean, you gotta kind of factor in a bunch of things. But again, it is the best pork you will ever eat. Factor that in. I was just in the grocery store yesterday. Bacon's $10 a pound. All right. How much? She produced 35 pounds. Well, there's $350. And that's just the bacon. Then she produced another, I don't know, it was 150 pounds of brats. So there's do the numbers in the end so that you know what you're making or what you're not making.
Do you have like an average, like between numbers? You don't have to give an exact, but do you have a between numbers?
So I was paying $3 a bushel for corn in June.
Okay.
Okay, I just paid $5 a bushel, and May futures are now at 7. So like everything else, like the price of corn is going through the roof. So when my input costs double, suddenly that's all the margins on everything. So when you say an average, well, when corn is cheap, it's a lot easier to make money. We don't raise pork. We don't sell any pork. Mostly because I don't like dealing with that many different people. I mean, when you're selling a butcher, I mean, it's to every single person. When you sell piglets, there's some people from Texas came up and they bought 16 piglets from us. Okay, there's a guy coming from Canada, a dozen. So you're able to move more animals and talk to people. And generally, people that are buying piglets are farmers themselves, and they don't mind my abrasive attitude. People that are buying pork,
People who are purchasing pork from you are going to be a lot more picky.
Okay.
a headache.
And if they are unhappy, you are going to hear about it, and a lot.
So if you were just getting them in the spring and then butchering them after the 7 months, they're
Any
they're
pig,
okay.
any pig will do.
They're
Any
not gonna do
large breed pig will. The Red Wattle Hog Association doesn't appreciate me saying that, but it's the truth. I mean, you guys you're just starting out. Go ahead.
We raise sheep and steers. So with our sheep, we have Icelandic sheep.
Excellent.
And we had purebreds. After breeding, we struggled learning to kind of raise them from the first few. But I read that it's better to start out with a half heritage, half cross. I don't know. That was just someone's opinion. I didn't know if you had an
Yes,
opinion about that. about pigs.
absolutely. When you buy your pigs, when you buy a commercial pig, they're going to be crossbred. Okay, very few people purebred commercial operations because of something as this hybrid vigor. So for you guys, buy crossbreeds if you can.
So
Sell to your friends and soak them for every dime that they Tell them how great the pork is and how what a great thing they're doing for the future of agriculture.
Well,
Yeah.
we do as, like my family and stuff like that, but we trade between each other. Like I raise chickens, so I'll choose and if I shot a deer, then we kind of help with the meat. But because I don't have a dehydrator or smoker, so I will give an extra amount and keep some for themselves while I get the benefits of them cooking it and I don't have to worry about it. So
Every farm's going to have a different business model. I mean, I don't know if I can call it a business model when you're raising 3 or 4 pigs, but I mean, you're spending money to obviously get a product in the end. So it is a business model. I mean, these are all cull sows. They have litters, and for whatever reason or not, they're they're not going to be productive for us anymore. The butcher, okay? We pay the butcher, we bring it back, we put it in the freezer, and then, you know, our friends and family will stop by and pick up whatever meat down, put it in my grandma's freezer, and my brother calls me, he's like, yeah, that bacon's great. You did not just take grandma's bacon. So, I mean, obviously there's different scenarios that each of us are gonna have to deal with in raising pork even, or not have your brother constantly, you know, stealing
Raiding
pork.
the freezer.
Yeah, raiding the freezer.
What would you say is an average or rough cost for an 8-week-old baby pig? If you're buying 3 to 4.
If you're buying a commercial pig,
Heritage.
if you're buying a heritage pig, then you need to find a heritage like me.
Okay. So
Okay.
like what?
I charge $125 for a 8-week-old pig. Things are like that one. She might be 7 weeks, but the umbilical hernia. Her mother did a fantastic job of picking the worst possible. I don't know if you remember. There was a 50-degree day, February. No, maybe it was the first week of March. There was a 50-degree day. Her mother was out laying a frozen puddle of water the day before she gave birth. And then she went and picked a way away from anywhere that didn't have any straw or anything. When I got there in the morning, they're all shivering, half the babies were frozen, and it turned really cold. I think the mother got sick from being in the puddle. She wasn't producing any milk, and I brought 5 of them in the house, and she was the only one that survived out of a litter of 13.
Wow.
Going with that?
The cost of a baby pig?
Yeah, the cost of the baby pig.
That pig was worth $1,000. Okay, but spread over a bunch of them. You can, you know, at $125. How is that the age of it?
Okay.
Normally they're a lot bigger than that.
No,
That
okay.
she's small,
makes-
and she's gonna spend. Both of them are gonna spend their life on our farm. They're going to be great pigs because they're handled a lot, so they'll probably end up become breeders. Even though they had tragedy in their lives, their genetics still might be good enough to become good breeders. And we've got a pig called Pocket, and she was that size she didn't, her brothers were 100 pounds, and she was still 10 pounds. We called her Pocket because you could just hold her, in your pocket. She's 800 pounds, and she's given us many litters. So, you know, that just because they start out as runts doesn't mean that they won't grow up to be big pigs. They 5 to 40 pounds when you get them, and 8 weeks. If they're weaning them at 8 weeks, I would want them to be 9 weeks. You don't want to get a pig that's just weaned unless you're comfortable with putting it somewhere where it's going to get. She's got kind of a rattle. I don't know if you can hear her breathing.
Yeah.
Okay, her mouth was like all. It wasn't even there, because she was up, it got infected, and like her whole top lip, she couldn't even barely drink milk out of a dish because her face was so chewed up when I got her, and it's just been a rough go for the little one. There's pneumonia and all that, but you know, hopefully she'll survive.
What type of things might help with infection?
So a vet is expensive. So we're still on buying baby piglets.
Okay.
$125 is kind of the going rate for a heritage pig.
Okay.
You're going to be driving for that.
Okay.
A guy just called me from Marshfield, and he's like, I've been foots this year, I can't find any. He's like, I'm sick of chasing all over the state looking for these pigs. I want to get some breeding stock. So he's going to be buying breeding stock so that he can raise his driving a couple 100 miles just to go buy his baby piglets.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to start with heritage pigs if you can't find them. If your neighbor is advertising pigs for $50 a piece and they're a good size, probably can get away with it. And if you're just butchering them, there's nothing wrong with raising a commercial hog. It's just that when they get older and they're become adults, more adult issues, that they can become dangerous.
So if you were just getting them in the spring and then butchering them after the 7 months, they're
Any
they're
pig,
okay.
any large breed pig will do. the Red Wattle Hog Association does saying that. But it's the truth. I mean, you guys are, you're just starting out. Go ahead.
We raise sheep and
Yep.
steers. So with our sheep, we learned though that we have Icelandic sheep,
Excellent.
and we had to. And after reading, you know, we struggled learning to kind of raise them from the first few. But I read that it's better to start out with a half heritage, half cross. I don't know. That was just someone's opinion. I didn't know if you had an
Yes,
opinion about that. about pigs.
absolutely. When you buy your pigs, when you buy a commercial pig, they're going to be crossbred. Okay, very few purebred commercial operations because of something as this hybrid vigor, or I think it's called heterosis, which is generally in a first generation of two purebreds, you're going to get the best dominant traits of both breeds. This one here, this Red Wattle GOS cross, she is probably going to grow faster than a purebred GOS or a purebred because she has that hybrid vigor.
I think there's a variety of heritage crosses out there, so they
There
are
are.
going to be a little more mild tempered.
So one of the hair on anything else that I particularly am not a fan of is called Mangalitsa. And all the Mangalitsa fans out there are not going to be happy with that. We had some pork chops, and they were probably 60% meat, 40% fat. They are very slow growing. They finish in about 14, and they're really fatty. A lot of people cross them so that they can get them to grow fat, use a little bit more meat. People love them because they're known as the woolly pig. I don't know if you've seen these things, they are absolutely adorable.
But if it's adorable, then it's gonna be harder to eat.
It's gonna be harder to eat.
Right.
They're also known as a large because it's a Hungarian breed of pig. And if you're making candles and the things that they do out there in Hungary or Transylvania or wherever they're making candles yet to see in the dark, you're gonna need extra lard in your tasty meat. I mean, it was a really excellent pork chop, except that cutting off, huge chunks of fat. And as much as I like to eat the fat on my pork chops, I just couldn't eat all of that. So crossbred heritage, or if you can get, like you said, a half heritage, find someone that's raising something like Tamworth is a little bit more popular heritage breed. You might be able to Tamworth crosses out there. And Tamworth is known as a bacon hog because it's got a longer body, so it's got longer sides to it. Breeds it,
Now, when you, if you got, let's say, do they both have to be female, or what's the best combination, or does it not matter if you're just doing spring and fall and what you're?
So a baby girl is called a gilt,
Okay,
and it's called a boar right up until he gets castrated, and then he's known as a bear.
okay.
So as long as they've been castrated, which is very important because it's called boar taint. They develop hormones very early before, and they will smell. I don't know if any of you have had goats. Okay, boar goats are very awful smelling creatures. Boar pigs also develop an odor, and that goes into the flavor of the meat. So you do not wrap it up. Any other questions? I think we covered.
The other question I wanted to ask is shelter. If they're,
Oh yeah, housing.
if they're,
It's on the. So pigs need to be out of the sun.
okay, protection from sun.
Protection from sun, protection from. All right, if you're going to keep them through the winter, or if you're going to be getting them when it's cold, or you got to need a really low roof, as low as they can just barely fit under there,
Okay.
so that they can keep the heat in and keep the wind off of them. They don't have fur, they can't sustain the type of weather that or a cow can. We use plywood, just plywood, simple plywood huts.
I'm thinking like pallets with scraps of stuff on the outside.
Pallets have nails in it. Pigs like to chew stuff. We use screws. Actually, there's a pickup truck out there with a bunch of junk in the back of it. That's the farm truck. So you guys get in there, and that's farm. No, that's pig farming
Okay.
stuff. So you guys can just look at that.
Do they, if you put, it keeps horses from cribbing, it's brown and it tastes bad, onto that?
Nothing will stop
Nothing
a
will stop them. Okay.
determined pig. They will
They
destroy.
like, got it.
Amen.
What do you want me to go over? USDA tag, these have premise IDs on them. If your pig has one of these, you know the farmer is following all the rules. Ear notches, then I would ask them to make sure to see that their herd is tested for this PRRS. It's something required in Wisconsin for people to be selling. All right, another thing that you should be having, syringes and this ivermectin. This is wormer also for treatment of and mange, blue coat, anytime that they get opened up. If you have a pig that's acting, not quite mark it so you know which one to be looking at. Unless you have two pigs, and obviously can tell the one with the spot on his head. I think we covered it. Just general wormer. Pigs pick up parasites. So this is part of a regular, you know, all the organic people out, they want to use diatomaceous earth. I'm sure you all know about, wants to use that as a feed additive for wormers. Nothing beats the industry standard. This stuff works every time. If they're on an open the life cycle of a parasite is they actually have to eat the eggs, so they actually have to eat fecal material to get more parasites. If they're out on pasture, you might be able to worm them when you get them quarantined area, worm them twice, turn them loose on pasture, you probably won't have any problems. If you use the same pasture over and over again, this should be used every couple months.
Do you just mix them?
This is pelletized and it can be mixed in. You can get it in a powder form mixed in. When they're small, I like to actually liquefy this and mix it in with wet feed to make sure that it's uniform so they all get the right amount, because otherwise you don't know if they're getting the pellets or not. Am I done?
Sounds good to me.
Do you have business cards in case we might want to buy a pig?
Business cards. I think that groups of 3 or 4, you know, they work the same as 2, where they have a little community. You know, when you start getting into bigger groups, you can get it where there's going to be one that's picked on, and then it's not going to grow as well. And it's a social club, you know. So obviously, the more you have, eventually there's going to be one that
Pecking order.
yeah, a pecking order. But you
There's always someone in.
yes, the queen bee,
Yeah.
and I don't mean bumblebee.
So, what is your opinion on pigs and children? Like, is it? I don't obviously know anything, so I mean.
These pigs and children, great.
Right.
200-pound pigs and children. 700-pound breeding animals that get temperamental, probably not a good idea.
So, how big do the red wattles usually get?
Well, large breeds get to be 1,000, and they classify them by large breed pigs. Red wattles, because they're not production trait, they grow at about 75% of the rate. So if it takes for a commercial pig to get to be, I don't know exactly what it would take, okay. How'd the math work on that? No, it'd be 70 for a commercial hog, 100 days for a red wattle to get to the same.
To get to the same weight.
Right. So if you're going to be butchering a red wattle pig at 7 months, I'm there in 5.5 months, or approximately.
Is that what it normally takes for the red wattles? Is about 7 months.
From the day that they're born to the day that they're 250 pounds on a feeding schedule. If you're feeding it whatever you're bringing home from school lunch, or people source all kinds of garbage for the pigs will grow feeding them food garbage and bakery and all kinds of stuff like that, but it will affect their growth rate, and it will affect their quality of meat and consistency. If you're feeding it different stuff every year, you're never going to have the same type of meat in the end. Some people are like acorns. Well, okay, you can feed them acorns, but I probably wouldn't feed them acorns the entire time. And if you try and train and just feed them acorns, you might end up with sick and dead pigs. Now you've got livestock, you've got dead stock. Not generally. We've gone
Not too much salt.
well, salt poisoning is another issue.
Yeah.
Pigs get salt poisoning. If they have plenty of, it's usually not an issue. But if you restrict their diet to things like bakery, which are high in salt, they can get salt poisoning. Or if you mix your pigs with your cattle where there's a salt lick out there, the first time that you turn your pig might run out to that salt block and take a big bite out of it. Next thing you know, they're laying dead in your pen. So salt is something that you need to be mindful of for your pig's consumption.
If they're eating regularly every day, can they have random other things along with that? I mean,
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say that if you provide them with the same grain every single day, you can feed them as much other stuff as you want because they're going to want their grain. They're used to it. They like it. You throw them a head of cabbage and they might take a couple months, all right?
Okay.
Same thing with the bakery. If they develop a sweet tooth, now you can have something, where this feed aggression. You throw some old bakery in there and suddenly now they're fighting over the stuff that you just put in there and you've changed their routine. You don't want to change an animal's routine. You want them always happy, always a really good, even quality meat. Stress is the worst thing for the but
So about how many, you talked about, having them in groups of 3 to 4. You've been doing that for so long. Have you found like your sweet spot of how many, pigs you're raising actually kind of evens out and makes you money and you're not losing money? And I know you're losing some money, but, but kind of, I know there's like a, spot where you're like, okay, this is good.
So the initial investment to buy the 6 gilts and boar, the registered, we went and bought registered stock, so they're $250 a piece. We drove to North Carolina for the boar, because they're a rare breed, and we've driven Ohio, New York, and we've been as far as Seattle, so to get the whole thing rolling. They're a very, adaptable animal. Most farms start with pigs, or at least historically speaking, the pioneers all had pigs. And feed them anything that a human can eat. They're omnivorous. But if you want to have consistent quality meat, you want to feed them a consistent type of feed. It's fine in a pasture or out in a woodlot, but you want to give them the same amount of grain every single day so that they have a consistent rate of growth and produce a lot of different types of grain that you can feed. There's people that feed organic. I think organic is kind of, it's just a label on something. It doesn't actually ensure that you're getting feed. We buy our grain locally, and that ensures giving a good price to the farmer and also good value to us. Corn, main source of most pig feeds. Right now, corn is really expensive. So there are other options like barley and wheat. Another part of feed is the protein. There's soybean meal, or there's linseed meal, or there's like fish meal. Like there's other types of protein products that, depending on what your preference is and where you plan on marketing it, you have to choose based on what you want. Some people don't want soy. There's a lot of farmers out there that do no corn, no soy, so they run them on pasture and they feed them like a barley or oat. We do corn and soy. It's a traditional pig feed. We also run them on pasture so that they get the benefit of not being caged up. The quality of meat is going to be similar, but the flavor will change depending on what you're feeding them. So your corn and soy is going to have a traditional flavor, or that's corn and soy. It's going to have a distinct flavor to it. If you're feeding them fish meal, obviously it's going to have a fishy taste. Also is known for having kind of a fishy aftertaste if you use too much of it in your feed. When you're buying feed, you need to be kind of thinking about what your end product is going to be. The pasture, we use clover or grasses work just fine. Pigs do not have a rumen. They're not a cow. They cannot survive on grass. Everyone's into grass-fed beef. Grass-fed beef is great, and they're meant to digest that. Pigs, it's a supplement. Clover is something that, you and I we can go out there and eat clover. We don't get a ton of nutrition. Pigs will get more nutrition out of something in the legume family. Any of the clovers or alfalfas work for pasture. Pigs are pretty hard on pasture. Pigs love to root. I mean, that's what they do. When all their waking hours they're out there. So choosing something that has deeper roots, like clover or alfalfa, that can handle a little bit and come back, is not a bad option if you're planning on planting a pasture. Rotational grazing is another way of keeping your pastures healthy, where you let them out on a section, let them browse, eat it all, get them off of that so that there's enough roots left so everything can regrow. We don't rotate just because we have like a couple sows per acre, so they kind of they themselves within the pasture. Another problem I found with rotating pigs is that pigs are smart. Eventually they figure out how to rotate themselves, and now you've got about in the neighborhood. Keeping pigs inside, so fencing. If you want to raise your pigs in a barn, you can raise them in a barn. Plenty of space. Stress is going to affect the quality of your meat. If you have 2 pigs in a pen like this, they're going to be buddies. They're going to fight a little bit. No one's like that. But if you put 10 pigs in a pen like this, there's going to be a lot of fighting. They're going to end up with bit-up faces, and it's going to affect the quality of your meat because your animals are stressed. So not saying that you can't raise animals inside of a barn or inside of a small pen. Be aware that they need a certain amount of square footage to be happy. I would say that each animal needs like 100 square feet, a 10 foot by 10 foot area pig, at butcher size, which is going to be 8 months. So you might as well give them that much space to start out with. Out on pasture, if you're planning on not rotating pasture, I think you're going to get away with maybe a couple thousand pounds of per acre that won't completely deplete it. So if you got a 5 acre field, you start out with a dozen baby piglets, which will end up being 3,600 pounds of animal in the end, and they probably won't completely destroy it. You can also go behind them and kind of reseed what they've done or fill in the divots a little bit. Back to the fencing. We use electric fence, but we have woven wire perimeter. A lot of people will tell you can get away with just electric fence, like a single electric fence wire, which is fine right up until it isn't. And as soon as they go through the electric fence, you'll forever have a pig going through your electric fence. That's doing a woven wire with T-post as a perimeter, and then right on the inside using an electric fencer. Invest in the most expensive electric fencer you can buy. Well, don't go buy the $3,000 one. That's for like open range, bison and stuff like that. You don't need something that powerful because it's powerful when they touch it. But you can get something in the $100 range. They rate them by joules. The cheap ones are like a quarter joule or a half a joule. Those, it tickles. A pig with, they're not going to be deterred by it. You want to get something that's at least 2 joules, if not 6 joules will wake you up. And at night, if you're looking out on the pasture and they touch it, you'll be able to see the spark touching. That's how you know that it's working, and it will be an effective deterrent.
So when you say 2 to 6 joules, is that's dependent on the size of the fence, right?
Size of the fencer. Fencers are rated by the power output.
Okay. So no matter how matter.
It does matter.
Oh, okay.
So the fencers are rated by mileage. It's like 15 mile or 30 mile or 100 mile or 200 mile, but that also correlates with the amount of output. It's not voltage or amps, it's joules. That's as far as like the power output.
Okay. So
So-
if you just have like smaller, like an outdoor paddock, so to speak, not necessarily a pasture, you wouldn't need the 6. You could probably.
1 acre, okay, so 1 acre, you're still gonna want 2 joules.
Okay.
Because when the smaller ones can't, so it rains, everything's wet, you've got grass growing on it, and suddenly it doesn't shock. It will, you can go out there and touch it and you can feel it. I mean, it might startle you, but it's not going to provide a deterrent. And you're always planning for a worst case scenario. Your pigs are out there rutting, you know, you got your fence set up, you know, 12 inches from the ground. It doesn't take them long to mound up dirt on top of it. So now let's have something that's designed to shock through that you're gonna be out there looking at your fence every single day. Every time they get out, you're gonna be like, well, why are my pigs out? $50 fence there at Fleet Farm, and now every time that it rains, there's no deterrent. You can get ones that have a readout. There'll be like a little digital display to show you what the output is on it. So when it goes to 0, you know, it should be in the 6 to 12. You know, like I think it's called a Mark 8 is what we have, and that's I believe a 50-mile fencer, which is 2 joules. We also have, used the 6 joule. So you got to hook up the more expensive fencer, but like anything else, high performance, they burn out, like the components burn out. You know, if you have a 1-year factory on it and it burns out after 2 years, there goes $350. Instead of buying the one that's like $200 that isn't as high performance but will last forever. So you have to read the reviews, and then make sure if you can get an extended by the hot rod, get the extended warranty on it so that the factory will cover it, because they do burn out. Also unplug it if there's going to be lightning or something like that, because you got a bunch of metal fence posts connected to a bunch of metal fencing, and when the lightning strikes, if it strikes anywhere on the farm, you might be your fencer. All right, feed. Then what was the outline? I think we were going to talk about breeds of pigs. You need to choose the breed of pig that's right for you. There's small breeds of pigs. There's one called an American guinea hog, and that's, a lot of people start with the American guinea hog. It's fairly thrifty is what they consider it. It eats it hasn't been bred for production characteristics. So it still has more of that wild pig in it. So it roots, it eats lots of different stuff, but it doesn't grow very big, it doesn't grow very fast. The butcher, they're gonna be like, what are you doing with this little pig? It's gonna yield 50, 60 pounds of meat. It's like a deer. But they're not gonna hurt you. I mean, they could bite you, but they're not gonna actually run you over. Look at that. Oh, breeds was first. All right. Pigs. There's other ones called coonies, I believe they're called. Even smaller. They've got a really flat face. I think they're pretty ugly, but they're even smaller yet and easier to handle. Also, there's Julian pigs or something like that, which are like, they call them teacup pigs. Everyone has them as pets. There's also potbelly pig with beginners. In my opinion, that's all just for hobbyist stuff. You're not gonna sell a lot of pork to people. People aren't gonna be happy with the size of them. It's best to get one of the smaller or more docile commercial breeds. I use commercial loosely because there's a lot of heritage breeds which aren't considered commercial. You have a Gloucester Old Spot. I don't know if anyone heard of that. It's a very dull breed which is really good at mothering, very popular. Okay, they're hard to find because they grow a little bit slower, they're a little bit smaller.
What was that called?
OS. If you Google capital G-O-S, Gloucester, I believe that's pronounced, is a area in England, which I assume, or Wales or something. That's a very docile breed. Oh.
So the American guinea hog, is that one of the ones that you were saying was just for fun, or is that a?
So okay. I'm not saying that you can't use them. It's a very popular breed. There's a lot that raise the American guinea hogs. If you raise them long enough, they'll get big enough to give you a regular size. Most people want to be able to get their pigs in the spring, butcher them in the fall, and have a decent body weight. So we've got two pigs here. This is a this is from a Gloucester sow, a red wattle boar. So Gloucesters are white with spots. This one is a red. This one was a runt, and it was from a big litter, and it was getting bit by its litter mates. Okay, this is a red wattle. So that one has a scarring on its face because it was getting mates. In large litters, that happens where they're fighting for a teat, and this one, I had to take that one from its mother. This one here has an umbilical hernia. I don't know if anyone can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a common thing. When they're small like that, you know, they should just kind of dry up. If they get red wattles are also a docile breed. That's what we raise. They also grow pretty fast. I consider red wattles the best all-around heritage breed. They have big enough litters. They're good enough mothers. Very easy to work with. I mean, other than like, I've grabbed their babies from them, you might have issues. The mother might come and want to bite your shoe off. And obvious with any breeding stock, boars are dangerous. I mean, just if he's pawing at the ground, chopping his mouth and foaming, you know, and doing his little dance, you probably don't want to be in there messing with him. So, GOS, red wattles, there's another one called a mulefoot. Mulefoot because it has a solid foot. It's another docile, smaller breed that's pretty popular as far as heritage breeds are concerned. What you're going to find when you know, if you, I mean, who here has raised pigs before? Okay, who here plans on raising pigs in the near future?
It's my husband.
Okay.
It's a husband problem.
Yes.
Okay, I guess another question is, who here has either bought a lottery to been to a casino? Okay, so, I mean, pig investment than the casino, obviously, but they aren't, raising pigs is not a very profitable enterprise when you're really sort of, they call it economy of scale. If you're buying a 50-pound bag from Fleet Farm, you're paying twice as much as what I pay when I go and grind 20,000 pounds of feed. So your pork at the end of the day is going to be twice as expensive as the pork that I produce. And the pork that's even more expensive than what the big guys produce because they go and buy it or grow it themselves, put it up in a big bin, have automated systems. We don't have automated systems, so I'm out there an hour every morning doing chores, hour every afternoon. So you're raising pork because it's going to be better pork. You can't buy this quality pork in the store. And if this quality pork, you're going to be paying through the teeth to have someone, you know, raise you that type.